Hari Om.
Hari Om, sir.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Okay, let's start.
Hari Om, everybody.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. Good morning, Suprabhat. We will start with any questions. Are there any questions? Yeah, Raj.
Yeah, it's actually me. So in the last class, there was a line, Sattvic intellect draws the distinction between bondage and liberation. So, I mean, this is somewhat not very easily discernible. Secondly, is bondage and liberation the same for, what is bondage for, X? Is it the same for Y as well? I mean, a bondage and liberation like constant terms, or is it like contextual, like something can be bondage for one person, can just be not be bondage? I don't really or is it a state of absolute?
Okay, so we're going to discuss Sattvic Buddhi in detail today, but I'm glad you brought the question. It'll serve as a prompt for the rest of this class. But before I answer that question, are there any other questions related to, because we're going to discuss this through class, and I will make sure I address this. Any other questions? Okay. Sattvic Buddhi. So we were discussing, the next thing we started to discuss in the previous class was Buddhi. Buddhi has also been classified as Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. We've all been given a Buddhi. We are all born with the Buddhi, but what is the quality of that Buddhi? The Buddhi is our engine. But what is the quality of that Buddhi? See, when you look at the chariot is a metaphor in Vedanta, in the Upanishads. So another name for Lord Krishna was Partha Sarathi. Partha Sarathi means the charioteer, the Sarathi of Partha. Partha is another name for Arjuna. Partha Sarathi was Lord Krishna. Now one can literally translate it as the charioteer, but the spiritual philosophical way to interpret it is one who guided Arjuna. A charioteer is one who manages the chariot. The chariot is a mere vehicle. The chariot is a simple tool, or rather very complex tool, which will help you fight the battle of life. But how you steer that chariot can make or break your battle. If you're not able to steer the chariot properly, you'll not be able to strategize. In fact, you'll damage yourself. So what is that chariot? That chariot is made up of of course, a body with 5 horses pulling it. Traditionally, there are 5 horses in a chariot. Many places you must have seen the depiction of the chariot. Next time you see the depiction, usually people confuse that they only put 4 horses. Actually, there's supposed to be 5 horses. The 5 horses represent the 5 senses. The horses representing the senses which are pulling you towards the world. The chariot is what, the horses are what pull the chariot. And they are connected. So the 5 senses are sort of connected to the chariot or the charioteer through the reins, that long rope tied to the horse and connected to the charioteer. The reins represent the mind. Now, where the horses pull, so the reins get pulled. The rope gets pulled wherever the horses pull. So the senses drag the mind into the world. The mind is that thread which connects the outer and the inner world. It connects the world and the senses to the inner world. So the mind, the reins get pulled wherever the chariot pulls them, wherever the horses pull them, the senses pull them. Just as your senses are attracted by taste, by touch, by smell, by sight, and that stimuli of taste, smell, touch, sight attracts your mind, isn't it? Your senses are attracted to something, and your mind, no sooner than your senses are attracted, your mind starts dwelling on it. Your mind starts imagining it, wanting it, wishing it. So your mind gets drawn to the world by the senses. But who's the person controlling the reins? That makes or breaks. The charioteer, the Sarathi, is the one who's controlling the reins. If he controls the reins properly, the horses will move according to his beck and call, and he'll be able to maneuver the chariot. If the Sarathi is not strong, if he's not skilled, the horses will just go amok. They'll run here and there and cause the chariot to crash. So the Sarathi is your buddhi. Lord Krishna was Arjuna's Sarathi. He was his intellect. Arjuna had no intellect. Confused, confounded. Lord Krishna was Arjuna's intellect. So what is the quality of your Sarathi? The role of the Sarathi is to regulate, control, guide, direct the mind. Just as a charioteer controls the reins and in turn controls the senses. So the role of the Sarathi is to guide, control, direct, regulate the mind. But what is the quality of your Sarathi? So that quality is further divided into Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Tamas means useless Sarathi. Better not to have such a Sarathi. Replace it immediately. Rajas means mediocre Sarathi. Confused, not very skillful. A true Sarathi, a true Buddhi is a Sattvic Buddhi. That's what we are striving for. And the Sattvic Buddhi, it is defined in 3 terms. The role of the Buddhi is a tool for thinking and reasoning, judging and deciding, distinguishing, discriminating, understanding. That's the role, that's the function of the Buddhi. So how is a Sattvic Buddhi defined? It's defined in 3 functions, right? The capacity to distinguish between path of action and inaction. Action and renunciation. Means what path should I walk? What should I not? Which journey should I take? Which road I shouldn't go down? What should I do? What should I not do? What is my obligation? What is not my obligation? First of all, to have a clarity about action and renunciation, you have to have a clarity of your goal. So long as there's no clarity of a goal, so long as there's no clarity of a purpose, so long as there's no clarity of who you wish to be or what you wish to be, this clarity won't be there. You will simply be imitating others. What others are doing, that will determine what you do. your action or your renunciation. So first of all, to have a clarity of action and renunciation, you have to have a goal. Thereafter, how much you do, to what extent you do, with what discipline you do. See, your desires will push you to indulgence. That's the nature of desires. How long is it? How many times have we all experienced this? We start a meal saying, no, no, I'm not very hungry. I'll eat very little. 7 minutes later, oh, 7 minutes. I ate too much. I ate too fast. What happens? The mind simply drove us to indulgence. How many times has it happened? I'm only going to watch one show. And you end up watching 4 episodes. The mind by nature is driven to indulgence. How much? Action and renunciation. A strong buddhi, a strong intellect is one that'll, it's like a traffic police. How much to allow, how much not to allow. So the stronger your buddhi, the stronger is that ability to discern and regulate what you ought to do, what you ought not to do. What is your obligation, what is not your obligation. And as we discussed in the previous classes, clarity of obligations comes from clarity of your goal, clarity of your purpose, clarity of who you want to be. That's where clarity of obligation comes from. Obligation is not something that is imposed upon you by the world. It's something that you choose for yourself. And only humans have this problem. Only humans have been given this problem. There's other two ways in which, so the first way in which a sattvic buddhi, the first marker of a sattvic buddhi is the clarity between action and renunciation. Related to it, of course, it's the same point he's making 3 times, but related to it is the understanding between, the clarity between what should be feared and what should not be feared. Very interesting. At every level, what should be feared, what should not be feared. At the physical level, or rather at the sensual level, what should be feared? We fear hard work. Oh my God, I've got a very hard week ahead. Monday morning, oh my God. And we don't fear laziness, lethargy. A sattvic buddhi fears laziness and lethargy. A sattvic buddhi is one that is acutely aware of tamas. A sattvic buddhi doesn't fear hard work, doesn't fear a challenge. Contrary to us, maybe a rajasic or a tamasic intellect. At the sensual level, we don't fear indulgence. Do we fear indulgence? We don't fear indulgence. It's okay, it's okay. What do we fear? We fear abstinence. Oh my God, I have to go to an ashram? I'll only get plain, simple food out there? No AC? We fear abstinence. We don't fear indulgence. A sattvic buddhi understands that abstinence will only increase the quality of his pleasure. Indulgence will erode his pleasure. He is afraid of indulgence. Fear doesn't mean irrational fear. Fear means an understanding of the negative impact. Indulgence will lead to the erosion of pleasure. I'm not going to elaborate on that. It'll take half an hour to elaborate on that. We've discussed it before, how indulgence leads to erosion of pleasure. You lose the value, you lose the pleasure for the thing. You lead to neutralization. Indulgence leads to erosion. Abstinence helps enhance the pleasure, keeps it fresh. At the emotional level, we are afraid of detachment, but we're not afraid of attachment. A sattvic intellect is afraid of attachment, understands the pitfall of attachment, and is drawn to detachment. He's acutely aware of the beauty of detachment. See, this clarity comes from knowledge. This ability to distinguish comes from knowledge. But he's only giving us food for thought. What a normal person, what an average person is afraid of, what a sattvic person is afraid of. At the intellectual level, or at the spiritual level, a sattvic person is attracted to, is not afraid of liberation, is not afraid of spiritual knowledge. He's afraid of ignorance. For a normal person, ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know all of this. Let me go on with my life. See, Swamiji once told us there was a person who wrote him a letter, a devotee who wrote him a letter who said, Swamiji, coming into my life, you messed it up. You made me think about things I never even bothered to think about. And it's only added to my problems. I was so blissfully unaware. See, you go into any group. After a point, they'll say, okay, बहुत हो गया, ज्ञान व्यान बहुत हो गया. That attitude. I'd rather be ignorant. I don't want to know all of this. Once in a while, I'll listen to a pravachan once or twice a year, but I'm not interested. Ignorance is bliss. I'll think about all these things after 60. That's the attitude. Whereas the sattvic buddhi is drawn. See, it's uneasy. The idea of existence, these philosophical questions are very uneasy. I've told you before. If you're talking about waking, dream, deep sleep, if you're talking about the states of consciousness, if you're talking about all these philosophical concepts, if you're not afraid, or if you're not a little jittery by it, then something is wrong. Because, these are jittery thoughts. A sattvic buddhi understands the value of this. A sattvic buddhi understands that these things need to be contemplated upon. The ordinary intellect will want to avoid it. I'll think about this later. I have much more problems to deal with in my life. That's the idea. So what ought to be feared, what ought not to be feared? At every level. Material, sensual, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, at every level. What is fearful and what should be quoted? Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. An angel is a sattvic buddhi, fears to tread. Fools rush in there. See, most importantly, at a material or emotional level, Adi Shankaracharya says, Artham anartham bhavaya nityam. Artham anartham bhavaya nityam. He's cautioning us to the power, the detrimental power of attachment to wealth. Artham anartham. Artha, wealth is calamitous, anartham. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have wealth. It means no sooner you gain wealth, you become deluded. He's cautioning us. How many of us heed that caution? A sattvic buddhi is one that heeds the caution. 9 out of 10 people, 99 out of 100 people, 999 out of 1,000 people get carried away, get drunk in power, get drunk in wealth, get drunk in name and fame and status. Artham anartham. The rare sattvic buddhi is able to understand. The rare sattvic buddhi doesn't misuse the power, doesn't misuse the wealth, isn't carried away by the arrogance and name and fame. A sattvic buddhi distinguishes between what should be feared, what should not be feared. If you have that clarity, all the world is for you to enjoy.
So does that mean that a lot of wealth and lot of power can be detrimental?
Anything can be detrimental. Absolutely. See,
No.
you go towards a tornado. It has a certain threat. But if you have the skill, you can harness it. right? So when Adi Shankaracharya says artham anartham, what he's meaning is that if you go without a strong buddhi, in the absence of a strong buddhi, 9 out of 10 times you will fall. And that's the history of the world. What is the history of the world? What causes the rise and fall of individuals, of empires? The moment you gain, you turn complacent, you fall. That's the history of the world. A rare person is able to sustain, maintain, not get carried away, not turn egoistic.
Sadhji, should I tell you the meaning of fear? Fear has 4 letters. FEAR. Fantasizing an event appearing real. Fear is, you see, you are fantasizing an event which appears to be real. So if you know that, then the fear will naturally vanish. This is what I have heard.
Sure. Most of our fears, when we lack clarity, we fantasize them, we imagine them. We are afraid of, because we can't see beyond our nose, right? So that's a rajasic or a tamasic fear, right? Whereas sattvic fear is not a fantasy. Sattvic fear is a cognizance of the power and the potential of something, and dealing with it appropriately. So when he uses the word fear from a sattvic perspective, it is coming from a place of clarity. So it's not an irrational fear. See, what you have to overcome is irrational fear. What you have to court is a clear understanding of the power and implication of things. So sattvic buddhi understands what should be feared, what should not be feared. 9 out of 10 things we fear should not be feared. The third thing, this is what Ankit asked, the clarity, the distinction between bondage and liberation. If you ask me, it is this clarity which gives clarity to what should be feared, what should not be feared. It is this clarity which gives clarity to what to do and what not to do. This is the fountainhead. What is bondage? What is liberation? First and foremost, coming to your question, is it the same for everyone? See, what is bondage for a child is not bondage for an adult. What is liberation for growing up from a child to an adolescent, from a child to a teenager, or from a teenager to a young adult is liberation, right? But even a young adult then gets bound in certain ways, and so liberation is a constant ladder you have to climb, right? The idea is to liberate yourself from your current level, to climb the next rung, to not get completely drowned in the bondage of where you are stuck. Life has a almost an automatic ladder. You automatically grow up from being a baby to a child to an adolescent to a teenager to a young adult to an adult. Life takes you up till there. Life takes you up. See, physiologically, psychologically, you grow naturally and you're able to liberate yourself from each stage almost naturally. You don't have to do much, it happens. But to grow from a adult, from a grihasti almost to the next level, life leaves to you. The rare person is able to grow from grihastha to vanaprastha to sannyasa. So to grow from grihasti to vanaprastha is what he's talking about. The distinction between bondage and liberation. Understanding that the purpose of life is the eradication, the sublimation of vasanas. Understanding the mechanics of life, how we have landed here, what are we looking for, pursuing these questions, contemplating upon the nature of our pursuits, the mind and its fantasies. If I get that, I will be happy. This clarity of bondage and liberation comes from knowledge of Vedanta. Vedanta talks about liberation. Its only interest, its main interest is liberation, to liberate you. Its central topic is the idea of lifting yourself from this bondage of birth and rebirth, birth and rebirth. What is bondage? The cycle of birth and death, birth and death. I'm talking at the utmost philosophical level. Ultimately, it is clarity about that sort of bondage and liberating, lifting yourself out of that. Even at a relative level, bondage in, say, a relationship, thinking and having clarity about what is the root cause, say, of a conflict, or the root cause of, you know, what you're unable to rise above, which is keeping you bound in relationships. People go round and round and round, keep bickering, battling about the same thing for years and years. Nobody gets to the root cause of problems. Getting to the root cause and uprooting it is going to lead to liberation. See, for example, we often say anger is an interruption of desire. If you get angry, there's a desire behind it which is getting interrupted. Most people want to control their anger, but they don't want to go to the root cause. What is the desire for which I'm getting angry? If you address the desire, you'll get liberated from anger. If you address and acknowledge the desire, if you find some conduit for it, if you find some ways and means to either channel it or grow above it, you'll be able to liberate yourself from anger. But people do not address the root cause. People are caught up in their anger. At best, they try to control it. They sing some bhajans or eat some pills. The rare person addresses the root cause. It's bondage. See, there's a story of the monkey and the sadhu. So, sure, you've heard of it. The monkey was attracted by chana, so it would go and disturb sadhus, meditating in the Himalayas. All they would have not much to eat. They just had some, some chana, and the monkeys would come and disturb them in their meditation or whatever. So what this one wise sadhu, he decided that I'm going to keep the chana in a lota, in a vessel where the neck is small, and as soon as the monkey is attracted by it and comes close, I'll beat him up. He'll never come back. So he sat in meditation, pretending to meditate, but side eye. He had a side eye on the lota he had kept next to him. It was freshly roasted chana. So the monkey came. No sooner the monkey came, it saw, it smelt, and it put its hand inside the lota. So it took its hand and it put it inside the lota. Now the moment it tried to grab the chana, its hand became a fist. It became a fist and it didn't come out of the lota. If the monkey was smart, nobody ever thinks of this. If the monkey was smart, it would have picked up the lota and but a monkey is a monkey. It won't find the solution. It's just caught up in the desire. So it grabbed the chana but couldn't get his hand out. In that much time, the sadhu woke up and started beating him up. The monkey was getting beaten up, but it still didn't let go of that chana. Now, please, we're not promoting cruelty to animals. We're just trying to drive home a point. You and I are that monkey. You and I are that monkey. We're getting beaten and bashed up by life. We are stuck in bondage. And we are getting bruised because of that bondage, but we're refusing to let go. You understand what is the bondage. If anybody can lift their hands and say, I'm free, a free person. No questions asked, I'll salute you. But heart and hearts, we know we are stuck in all sorts of bondage. We're not even finding answers. That's the problem. A sattvic buddhi, at least, first and foremost, what turns one sattvic is the search for a solution, the search for liberation. We are afraid of liberation. And when you turn truly sattvic in your buddhi, you know the distinction between bondage and liberation. Where there is bondage, you will not tread. You'll be afraid of it. You'll fear bondage in the kinds of thoughts you entertain. See, it is not possession that is binding. It's not your possession that is binding.
वो जल्दी आ रहे हैं 9 बजे ही आ रहे हैं
It's not it's not the things you own that you possess that is binding. It's your relation with them. It's your attitude with which you possess it. It's your possessiveness of them that is binding. It understands. Sattvic intellect understands and maintains the right relationship with the world. Maintains the right relationship with near and dear ones, with friends and colleagues, with actions, with roles and responsibilities. And all of this clarity comes because all his serious thoughts hath rest in heaven. I'm referring to that beautiful poem by Oliver Goldsmith, who compares a sattvic buddhi, a sattvic intellect, to a tall cliff. As a tall cliff that rises and lifts itself and falls, swells from the vale and midway leaves the storm. It swells from the valley, it grows up from the valley, and halfway all the storms of emotions and agitations are left behind. Though round its breast the rolling clouds are spread, eternal sunshine settles on its head. Its peak is connected to eternal sunshine. Means a sattvic buddhi, no doubt, is dealing with all sorts of clouds of problems and relations and issues and stresses and all sorts of familial issues which you and I are familiar with. No doubt they are dealing with it, but the clarity of how to conduct themselves, the clarity of how to manage them, that comes because eternal sunshine settles on its head. There is the clarity of spiritual knowledge, spiritual values with which they are guided. That clarity gives them the ability to manage, to deal with anything that can be binding, that can create bondage, anything that can be detrimental, what they should fear. It helps them make the distinction, what should be done, what should not be done. To what extent is our buddhi sattvic? Contrary to that is a rajasic buddhi, a wrong understanding of what is right and what is righteous and what is unrighteous. That confusion comes because of desire. Remember, go back to the poem, The Pond. When there is a strong desire, the buddhi turns hostage to the mind. The buddhi becomes a tool for justifying the mind's desire. That's where the confusion comes. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Little bit of this is okay, no? The wrong understanding between what is righteous and unrighteous because of strong desire. It's a confused interpretation. It's unsure about what its obligations and duties are. Why? Because the kartritva bhavana comes in. Where there is kartritva bhavana, your priorities will be. See, when there is kartritva bhavana, we are more concerned about how others will perceive our action. How will my choices be seen and received by others? And that is what will mess up the idea of. See, the very idea of obligation that you and I know of today in society, it's a completely messed up idea. And why is that? Because it's rajasic in nature. How will society perceive what I'm doing? And half the times that is what is determined to be obligation. I'm not saying it's always wrong. I'm not saying reject what the world tells you is your obligation, but know that obligation doesn't stem from social expectation. Obligation stems from your goals. And no doubt, playing your role to the best of your ability. Tamasic buddhi is that which is shrouded in ignorance. There's no hope. It's draped in layers and layers of ignorance. It sees wrong as right and it revels in it. It sees wrong as right and it revels in it. Cheating, hurting, harming, no problem. Use everything as perverse. Something about bondage and liberation. Yesterday, I was watching one of my favorite movies. Yesterday being a Sunday. You all know the movie Queen?
Yeah, Kangana.
Kangana Run Out. Kangana Run Out. Queen. And that whole movie is essentially about an epiphany, a realization in Kangana of what will be bondage and what will be liberation. Anybody remember what the movie is about? By the end of it, she tells this, her to-be husband, her fiance, bye-bye. But she does it so gracefully. No fights, no anger, no ladai jhagda, no nothing. She gives him his ring and she hugs him and says, thank you. So, understanding this distinction between bondage and liberation requires taking some difficult steps, requires thinking, requires challenging yourself, requires going against what may be the easy thing to do. But it leads to a lightness. It leads to a realization. And that movie is a beautiful depiction of that. Had she gone into that marriage, it would be ultimate bondage. There's a scene, towards the end of the movie where her to-be mother-in-law is saying, once the husband and father will go to work, we'll be enjoying. We'll drink tea, we'll gossip, we'll go to the parlor. What is she selling? She's selling an idea of liberation. She's selling an idea of fun and enjoyment. And Kangana sees it clearly. That's bondage. I don't want to live like that. We sell our liberation for comforts, for convenience.
But we have to have our buddhi sharpened na, to understand really what is the difference between bondage and liberation. We don't know.
Kabhi life gives us an opportunity. Life makes us stumble. Life gives us challenges. Every challenge that life presents you is an opportunity to exercise your buddhi. That's all I'm saying. See, buddhi, no doubt, it has to be sharp. But how is it sharpened? As he said, buddhi is a muscle. You have to use it to strengthen it. See, there's nobody with a buddhi of 100% clarity. For that, you have to be a saint. Everybody's trying to take the next step. See, the role of the buddhi. See, when you there was a video I saw the other day of an animal walking on ice in the cold region. A lake has just frozen into ice and the animal is treading carefully, and once or twice it takes a wrong step Very carefully, it puts its paw forward. It tries to measure the density of the ice, and then only puts its weight. Then it takes the next step forward, tries to, and once or twice it will make the mistake. His paw will go into the cold water because the ice is very thin. That's how we have to tread, with caution. That's it. Means you have to assess, judge, understand. The more you do it, it'll become effortless. It was a baby animal. It was a baby animal that was still learning how to. Once you'll become an adult, you'll intellectual in the strength of the intellect. Once you become an adult in that sense, you'll know, you'll understand. A situation will be thrown to you, you'll have clarity. A person will walk into the room, you'll have clarity of who they are, what they are. But the first time you're learning how to assess people, the first time you're learning how to assess situations, yes, you will stumble, you will fall, and you have to learn, but you have to use the buddhi. See, Swamiji used to say, you walk into the room, I'll be able to assess you within 2 minutes. So as you grow in that ability to objectively understand things and situations and people, it'll be very quick. But you have to start somewhere. And you can't always borrow others' assessment. You have to start by assessing yourself. You have to start by judging yourself. You have to start by understanding, and you learn from experiences. See, I'll share an example with you, my own example. First day I entered my organization, and by circumstance, I had to take care of HR. Only by circumstance. I didn't dream of doing human resources. There was a situation in the business, and our HR director had to step down because of certain health reasons. So they told me, now you manage. How will I manage? I have no idea. I still remember the first interview I took. I was interviewing for a salesperson. I have no idea what to ask them. I have no what questions to ask. I have no ways in which to assess and understand who they are. Long story short, I hired them, but it was a totally wrong hire. 3 months later, we had to ask them to leave. Complete mistake. Complete mistake. Today, you give me a resume, I know the 5 questions I have to ask the person. So buddhi is like a tool you have to use, and no doubt with experiences you'll falter, you'll make mistakes, but that's what your support system is about, right? There are friends and family to support you as you make mistakes, but we are afraid of making mistakes. We are afraid of exercising the buddhi. We're afraid of exercising our own thinking. So we don't build it, nor is it promoted.
And we camouflage it with mind. That is also a big problem.
Absolutely. That's another point. It's camouflage with ignorance comes about as certainty. Then I know exactly what I'm doing. This is exactly right. Everybody's doing it. Why are you thinking so much? Everybody's doing this. So it's definitely camouflage by mind, by desire, by imitation. So that capacity to think, reason, judge, decide, assess, understand. I mean, I'm using synonyms. There's no list I'm reading out of. I'm using synonyms. Assess, reason, judge, decide, understand, comprehend, discriminate, distinguish, measure, weigh. All of these are the functions of the buddhi. Every human being is a combination of spirit and matter. Spirit is your Atman, matter is your material equipments. Your material equipments are of 3 types. You have a physical body, but beyond the physical body, you have a non-physical body. That non-physical body is made up of mind and intellect. There's a distinction. This is your thought body, the level of the thoughts. Your mind is your vessel of emotions, feelings, desires, but distinct and different from your mind is your buddhi. Most of us only identify with our mind. What we wish, what we like, what we hope, what we want, even what we believe to a large extent is just mind. But distinct and different from our mind, the vessel of feelings and emotions is the buddhi, the tool of thinking and reasoning, judging and deciding. In buddhi is your sarthi. And as you build this Sarthi, it will turn Sattvic. It will know the distinction between bondage and liberation. It will know the distinction between what should be feared, what should not be feared. It will know the distinction between what should be done and what needs not to be done. That clarity will come. And what do you have to feed the buddhi with? You have to feed the buddhi with knowledge, and you have to exercise it. Knowledge is protein powder for your muscles. And ultimately, you have to utilize it. You have to exercise it. That's the only way. There's no other shortcut. I'm sorry. In the absence of a strong buddhi, it will be rajasic. Most of us have rajasic buddhis. It's the average buddhi that is given to us. The rare buddhi turns tamasic. But if it turns tamasic, it's very difficult to pull them out of it. Absurd beliefs, total perversion.
I'm reminded of a folk song of Daler Mehndi. मैं डर दी रब रब कर दी लोकी can chui mui. Most of the people are God fearing just because they don't know the solution. They don't they use that is how मैं डर दी रब रब कर दी लोकी can chui mui means becomes very weak. You become very weak by fear only. Fear kills you. So once you become sattvic, that means you use your discretion. Come, win over the fear. Win over the fear. Then you become strong. So this is what I think we are discussing. Sattvic means discernment of your mind, using the right in the right direction.
Indeed. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's beautifully summarized. Okay, moving on. Dhriti. Dhriti means steadfastness, consistency, your ability to stick to something. But what kind of dhriti do you have? There are 3 kinds of dhriti also. He discusses.
Sattvic steadfastness is the unswerving consistency one maintains in the pursuit of the supreme goal of self-realization. The firmness in restraining the activities of the body, mind, and intellect to steer clear of worldly entanglement and channelizing all efforts to attain spiritual enlightenment. Rajasic steadfastness is that with which you cling on to duties and responsibilities you have imposed upon yourself. These are your creation. They need not lord over you. Not realizing this, you turn pale at the thought of duty and responsibility and get into a fever of doing. That is Rajasic. Also, every human being is constantly driven by 2 motivations in life: to acquire wealth, to enjoy what he has acquired. For this purpose, he develops attachment to his work and anxiety for the fruit thereof. The consistency with which he works in this manner is again Rajasic. Tamasic steadfastness is the consistency with which a person foolishly keeps imagining, fearing, grieving, and despairing, and maintains an arrogant attitude in life.
I'll start backwards. Tamasic. Tamasic steadfastness is the consistency with which a person foolishly keeps imagining, keeps fearing, keeps grieving. Very interesting. Keeps grieving, keeps despairing, and maintains an arrogant attitude in life. Omji, this is the fear he's talking about, which you were talking about. Foolishly imagining and fearing things, and not willing to listen to knowledge. See, sometimes you must have seen new people who've never got into an escalator, in a airport. Oh, what'll happen? Huh? Now, one time you're afraid, it's okay. 2 times you're afraid, it's okay. Even the 10th time, if you go and you're afraid of the escalator, what is it? It's foolish. Everybody's doing it, nothing's happening. What is it? Foolishness. Hmm? Keeps imagining. Before a problem has arrived, you're imagining how bad it might be. Huh? If I have children, then this will happen, then that will happen. Half the people in my generation, they don't want to get married, they don't want to have children for whatever reasons, but it's constant imagination. You're not the only person in the world who's got married. You're not the only person in the world who's had a child. Millions have done it before you, millions will do it after you. But sticking to it, clinging to it, that's tamasic. It's okay to have a fear, but are you working it out? Are you thinking through it? Are you seeking advice? Are you trying to come to a reasonable conclusion about it? No. Tamasic steadfastness. Grieving and despairing, very interesting. Tamasic steadfastness in grieving and the consistency with which you grieve. It's a deep point out here. We grieve our emotional losses for years and years and years. Wow. He says it's tamasic. Not coming to a conclusion about an understanding about life and its mechanics. Not understanding the march of time. Not surrendering to the plan of nature. Grieving. Despairing. Crying about one's losses. He says it's tamasic. You don't know what you're talking about. You'll be in my position, you'll know. You'll experience it. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for what you have to go through. But to cling to it. Swamiji used to give a very deep example. He used to talk about a lady who had come to Swami Chinmayananda because her newborn baby had unfortunately passed. She had had a child before, it was 1 or 2 years old. She had another child which passed. And then she had another child later, 2 years later or something. And he said 40 years later he met that lady. And she was still grieving and despairing about it. We're not saying it's not meant to be grieved about. But you have to find closure for your own sake. And there's no time period. It's not saying, oh, within 1 year you have to find closure to your griefs and despairs. Within 2 years, there's no time period. You can take as long as you want, but are you seeking closure is the question. The steadfastness with which you don't seek closure is tamasic. You maintain that attitude. I know what I'm doing. I know what is right. I know what I have experienced. That it's an arrogance. Tamasic steadfastness is arrogance. Not willing to shift one's perspective, not willing to concede to another thought, not willing to grow above or rise above what one is. Rajasic steadfastness is the steadfastness, the consistency with which you cling to kartritva bhavana and bhoktritva bhavana. Rajasic steadfastness is the steadfastness with which you cling to kartritva and bhoktritva, the sense of doership I am doing this, I am doing this, I am responsible for this, this is my duty, me. You get into a fever of doing. It becomes a burden. That kartritva turns obligation into a burden. You're more concerned with the doer rather than the work. And if something doesn't happen, oh, you're so agitated, so agitated. Or bhoktritva bhavna, you're consistent in your craving for the result, to acquire and enjoy. We mentioned last time the carrot. The rajasic person is attracted by the carrot, incentive. The consistency with which you cling to kartritva and bhoktritva bhavna is rajasic. On the contrary, sattvic steadfastness, sattvic dhriti, sattvic consistency is the consistency with which you seek and pursue spiritual knowledge, the consistency with which you seek to grow. If even in non-spiritual terms, the consistency with which you seek to challenge yourself and refine your understanding, grow as a person, grow as an individual. So one is, and it's the exact opposite of tamasic, if you think about it. Tamasic consistency is the consistency with which you stay in your place, stay put. Sattvic consistency is the consistency with which you seek to grow, challenge yourself, change your ideas and beliefs, refine them, gain further knowledge, grow above your weaknesses. Rajasic is clinging to your sense of doership and your desire for the result. Kartritva and bhoktritva bhavana. Happiness, sukham.
Happiness, sukham. Sattvic happiness arising from the clarity of intellect is that which feels detestable in the beginning and ends up blissful. The happiness derived from the pursuit of the Supreme Self within, which entails physical restraint, emotional detachment, and intellectual understanding of spiritual knowledge. These practices demand effort and discipline. The practitioners find them stiff, even painful at times. Hence, the pursuit is said to be detestable in the beginning. However, with continued practice, they become pleasant, enjoyable, and turn wholly blissful in the end. Rajasic happiness is the opposite of sattvic. It arises from the senses contacting the objects, feels pleasant in the beginning and turns painful towards the end. Sensual pleasure is enjoyable only to start with, but the joy diminishes with continued contact and ends up with pain and sorrow. Tamasic happiness springs from ignorance of the Supreme Self, a happiness delusive of the Self from beginning to end, arising from sleep, indolence, or heedlessness. When you are ignorant of a malady, you remain blissfully unaware. It does not agitate you mentally. So also is the pleasure or joy derived from indolence, lethargy, indifference, heedlessness. That type of negative happiness is tamasic.
So once again, tamas is the bliss of ignorance. When you're happy because you're unaware. A person, say under the influence, I'm giving an extreme example just to drive home the point. A person who's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, One of the reasons why people pursue drugs or alcohol is an escape from the world. They want to be happy, they're unable to deal with the circumstances that they are in, so they seek that solace. And whilst they are in that frame of mind, whilst they are under the influence of whatever substances, they are happy because they are ignorant of reality, of circumstances. So tamasic happiness is happiness from ignorance. Rajasic happiness, on the contrary, is instant gratification. Rajasic happiness is the pleasure of sense indulgence, that which brings immediate pleasure. Most of us seek either Rajasic happiness or Tamasic happiness. That which brings instant gratification. You eat some good food, you watch a movie, you indulge in the senses. Instantly, it gives a pleasure. But the nature of this pleasure is such that it wears off. It loses its charm. In fact, you reach a state where it doesn't give you, if you indulge in completely in it, if you indulge too much in it, you lose the pleasure of it. The funny thing is, you'll be attached to it, but you lose the pleasure of it. Through Rajasic indulgence, whatever you contact, you develop a dependency on it, you develop an attachment to it, but it loses its pleasure over a period of time. A lot of things we enjoy in the world, a lot of things we possess, even in our house. The first time we enjoyed it, oh my God, such a pleasure. Now it's just there. We possess it, but there's no pleasure. So Rajasic happiness gives instant gratification, but slowly wears off. That which gives pleasure in the beginning, but turns painful in the end. Why? Because there's pain in separation, there's pain in it being taken away from you. There's an attachment, there's a dependency on it. It may not give pleasure, but separation from it gives pain. On the contrary, what is sattvic happiness? Sattvic happiness is happiness that begins painful, that begins as a challenge, that starts almost as a difficulty, but ends in bliss. Anything that requires effort, building your body requires effort, maintaining your body requires effort, building a business requires effort. It's painful in the beginning, it's stressful in the beginning. Ultimately, it's an auto mode, it's constant bliss. People are driven away from physical effort. In the beginning, it's painful. Ultimately, it gives pleasure, it's lightness. Emotional detachment. In the beginning, it's almost like, why am I making myself suffer? But it leads to bliss. On the contrary, emotional attachment in the beginning is very gratifying, but it leads to all sorts of problems in relationship. So sattvic is that which begins as a pain, which begins as difficult, but ends in pleasure, ends in nectar. The word used in the actual verse is nectar. It turns nectarine, amritam. Contrary to that is rajasic happiness, which is amritam in the beginning, which seems very pleasurable to die for in the beginning, but turns detestful in the end. Another term he uses in the actual verse, it's very beautiful. He says, Sattvic happiness is the gift of the buddhi. It arises from the clarity of the buddhi. To truly experience sattvic happiness, you have to have a durdarshi, a far-sighted buddhi that can see the value of the effort you're putting in today. Most of us don't have a far-sighted buddhi. All we're concerned with is today, now. If something is pleasurable now, I'll grab it. If something is painful now, I'll stay away from it. But a durdarshi, a buddhi that can see far, is able to see that today's pain is tomorrow's gain. Hmm? No, this is not a, all throughout the city they put these banners and these things. Today's pain, tomorrow's gain. But it's true. What may be inconvenient today, what may be challenging today, leads to much, much benefit. Tell a student that today's pain, studying, putting in the effort, it will be tomorrow's gain. How many of those will be able to see the value of the hard work they have to put in today? There'll always be a mix. Some are going to be driven by this sattvic happiness. Either they'll be able to see it or they'll have the surrender. They'll have the capacity to surrender to someone who will be able to see it. They'll surrender to either their parents or their guides. But the rest of us, listen, I don't want to put in all that effort right now. I want to enjoy right now. Rajasic. So what sort of happiness do you seek? Is it sattvic? Is it rajasic? Or is it tamasic? We'll continue our discussion. There's just Tyaga to complete in the next class before we move on. Once again, I'm going a little fast because but it's very important that you read this. Do come back with questions, just like Ankit came back with a question, because there's only that much I can discuss about this. A lot is left to be unearthed by your questions. So when you ask questions or clarifications on what these things imply, that's when we collectively will be able to dig further. I feel these are very practical descriptions of the variety of qualities we as humans have in each arena of life. So do go over this section multiple times, and I look forward to many more questions in the next class. With that thought, we'll take up any further questions if there are any quick questions. And
Utsav, that means buddhi is actually wisdom.
a sattvic buddhi has wisdom.
Okay. I mean, when you say buddhi, it's not intellect. So it is.
No, buddhi is intellect.
Okay.
But a sattvic buddhi is that which is able to turn knowledge into wisdom. A sattvic buddhi is a muscle
Yeah.
which churns knowledge into wisdom, into living wisdom.
Okay. Okay.
Buddhi is the tool with which you turn information into wisdom, into
Yeah.
understanding.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Any further questions?
So with regard to the question I had in the beginning of the class,
Sorry, I hope I answered that. Not. Yeah.
sorry?
I hope I addressed that, but yeah, I'll take up any.
Yeah, you addressed it. Just to clarify what I understood, I asked that question because it's still somewhat very easy to discern, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, and what ought to be feared and what ought not to be feared. But yeah, I didn't really understand, and what you explained to me is that the capacity that allows us to discern that is basically the third aspect, the ability to the distinction between liberation and bondage. So yeah.
See, as I said, bondage and liberation for a child is different than bondage and liberation for an adult is different than bondage and liberation for a. While there's no fixed age for any of these things, but there's a famous story of Swami Chinmayananda where this one young fellow came and said, I want to join your ashram. I want to pursue Atma Gyan. I want to study Brahma Gyan. And I want to gain moksha. Swami Chinmayananda said, have you ever been with a woman? Have you ever enjoyed wealth? Have you ever indulged in the senses? Go deal with that first and then come back. Means that a sufficient level of experience is perhaps necessary to even understand the value of liberation from it. You have to understand bondage before you seek liberation, right? Not to say that we should put away, we should hush away any young person wanting to talk about spiritual liberation, but um, it's not a casual thing when we talk about spiritual liberation for a child, or say for a school going child. Liberation from its attachments to school friends and school routines and that world, right, is what is necessary to take it to the next stage. Now, what kind of actions does it take up to lead to that liberation? If they study well, if they make the right choices, they'll be able to charter their way into the next stage of life. If they don't, they'll remain stuck in the bondage of that world. They won't be able to spring forward. Now, clarity of that liberation, or the need for that liberation, is what will help them make the right choices about what I should be doing, where I should be investing my time and energy, right? So here we're not talking about ultimate liberation, spiritual liberation. Here we're talking about liberation from your very current stage, right? Um, so life presents you with the choices. Now you will make the choices basis your understanding and awareness. This is your interpretation of what will keep you in that level, keep you in bondage, or what will help you spring beyond, what will help you grow above. Right? Does that answer your query?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it is when we talk in spiritual terms, it is understanding the bondage you and I are stuck in, and seeking to liberate ourselves from that bondage. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. Again we are born, again we die, again we go through life, we grow, we indulge, we decay, and we die. What are we seeking? To ask that question itself, to pursue that resolution, is seeking liberation, is wanting to rise above bondage. But that's in absolute terms. That's in the ultimate spiritual goal. But there's bondage and liberation at every level.
In terms of bondage, just an acknowledgement of the things that are binding us. Like it might not be easy for everyone to give up every absolute last material comfort, but just a cognizance that okay, these are things which are things which I'm dependent on in the world. An acknowledgement of the bondage, but still an inability to sort of like liberate or let go of it.
Yeah,
What is
absolutely.
happening?
That is the first step. To understand or to acknowledge that you are bound to something is the very first step. The beauty is, once you acknowledge that you have some kind of dependency, is about testing. You know, you are more versatile than you think you are. Huh? trying to do without it, you'll realize you're much more versatile than you actually are. See, suppose you tell me, no, I can't come to the ashram. I need, I need my protein intake for the day, and I need my AC, and I need my this, I need my that, I need my internet connection. I'll be like, listen, just come for 5 days, try it. You may or may not succeed. Chances are you might be able to do it, but putting yourself out there, experimenting, testing yourself, might make you realize that you're more versatile than you think you are. So acknowledging your bondage is certainly the first step. Then realizing that actually a lot of your bondage is actually your own mental obsession and assumption. There is a part of you that can do without it. You'll be surprised.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions we'll take up on Wednesday. So do come back. I'm happy to address all your good day and see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.